And so let's look at a couple texts. Let's talk about this idea. Why was it not a problem for the Septuagint translators, the Jews who were translating these Hebrew Aramaic texts into Greek, who believed in the one God Jah? Why was it not a problem at time for them to associate these beings with angels? Whether it was a god like El Gibor or gods, like we read about frequently in other texts, in Psalms and elsewhere. Okay, so let's take a look at Exodus. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 23. Turn there with me. Let me get a little drink of water there. Get my reading voice going. Exodus 23. This is very important. We're going to connect all this. You see how it all sort of is involving some of the same things in terms of beings described a certain way. We have the Isaiah 9 figure being called a wonderful counselor, mighty God, or an angel of great counsel. And then in Isaiah 11, we have a similar being, if not the same one, described in relation to the same or similar events, who is given the spirit of counsel and mightiness. And that's what we believe Jesus shows all over the place. But let's take a look at a couple of these earlier texts. Exodus 23. Just a couple texts here. Exodus 23. I'm going to get to the chat and look at some questions in a moment too. But I'm trying to lay a foundation and some groundwork here so that in answering your questions, I've already kind of covered material that I can hopefully just say, okay, well, as we discussed. Excuse me. So Exodus 23. This is now after they have left Egypt, okay? They have witnessed Jaho and all the things he did. And they saw Moses acting as God to Pharaoh, just like Exodus 7 said he would. Here, after all that, after all the attention focused to Jah, look at what he says. This is Jah talking. Exodus 23, 20 through 22. Well, just a little bit into 23 maybe. This is Jah talking, the God Jah. Here he's talking to Moses. Here I am sending an angel ahead of you to keep you on the road and to bring you into the place that I have prepared. Watch yourself because of him and obey his voice. Do not behave rebelliously against him, for he will not pardon you, your transgression, because my name is within him. However, if you strictly obey his voice and really do all that I shall speak, you see the connection here? Same ones. This one that he is sending ahead of them has so much trust by Jah, he turns it all over to him. You listen to what he says, you do not disobey him, he will not pardon you. It's not, I will not pardon you. He has authority not to pardon you. And why? Because he's speaking all that Jah speaks. Sound familiar? His name is within him. Then I shall be hostile to your enemies and harass those who harass you. Verse 23, for my angel will go ahead of you and indeed bring you to the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and I shall certainly efface them. Now ask yourself this question. All that you know now, if you've watched the prior series on Michael, the sons of God, do you think any other angel, and all the stuff we read from the Dead Sea Scrolls about Michael, do you think any other angel would be appointed to this? If so, wouldn't this angel also be among those who would be there with Gabriel, helping them fight the other nations? Because it says right here that this angel is the one bringing them into contact with all those other nations and defeating them. Well, that's Michael. That's Michael. He's been doing that according to Daniel and the Dead Sea Scroll text and 1st Enoch, as we have in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. quoted also by Jude in the New Testament. I can't see how this could be any other angel except possibly Gabriel. But, I mean, Michael is the one. Let me show you some more. Okay, so here it doesn't say there are a bunch of different angels taking this one angel, the prince of you people, just like Michael. My angel will go ahead of you. He's going to bring you to all these people. You don't disobey him. He will not pardon you. But yet it's still Jah speaking his name. You understand how closely associated, yet powerfully independent this being is with Jah? Now, look at Joshua chapter 5. Okay, so we're with Moses, right? He's about to get the written law, and then some things will happen, and eventually Moses dies, and then Joshua is taking over the lead of Israel. Oh, for Moses. That's like, so here you have Jah speaking to Moses, and he's telling Moses, I'm going to give this angel. I'm going to send this angel, and you do not disobey him. Now look at Joshua chapter 5. Joshua now, he no longer has Moses, but we just read, right? We just read there was going to be someone else. So who is that? Let's look at Joshua chapter 5, verse 13. So here's Joshua. And we're not going to get into too details of the count because it's not necessary. But it says, verse 13, it came about when Joshua happened to be by Jericho, that he proceeded to raise his eyes and look. There was a man. Remember, just like Daniel talks about someone like an earthling man who was above the stream and who was speaking to him and who was talking to Gabriel. There was a man standing in front of him with his sword drawn in his hand. So Joshua walked up to him, this man who's standing there with his sword. This is Joshua, right? The commander now of Israel. So Joshua approaches him directly and he says, are you for us or are you for our adversaries? So he doesn't know who this is. And so verse 14, to this he said, no, but I, as the prince of the army of Jaho, I have now come. Sar Tzabe, like in Tzabaoth, Lord of, Prince of the army of Jaho. With that, Joshua fell on his face and prostrated himself and said to him, what is my Lord saying to his servant? This is the same type of action given to Jesus, even called Lord here. And remember, we're talking about Isaiah 9, 6, and 7 ultimately, right? What's one of the terms he's called? Prince of Peace, princely rule. We've got an angel here who's being sent ahead of them to confront all these nations, according to Exodus 23, 20 through 23. Jah talking to Moses. Now, we're with Joshua, no Moses. And there's this angel. This, not just an angel, he's the prince. Prince of the army. And he makes Joshua fall down to his face on the earth. This is the same angel. This is the angel that was sent ahead of them. And he's about to tell Joshua how they're going to destroy Jericho. Just like Jah said would happen. Now, let's go to another account involving the Israelites and this angel. Judges chapter 13. Turn there with me quickly. This all ties back to Isaiah 9. You're going to see, I believe, or you'll see at least what I am seeing and why I think it. Judges 13. Remember, Isaiah 9 refers to the one they're describing as El Gibor, which the Septuagint, our best copies and earliest texts, translate as angel, the angel of great counsel. Judges, and then we saw in Exodus 23, 20 through 22, a special angel would have God's name in him and have the authority to not pardon anything they did. And he would go ahead of them and help them defeat all these other nations. Then we read about a special Prince of Jah's army who confronts Joshua and has such an effect on him, he falls flat on the earth with his face to the ground and calls him Lord. And yet he's identified as the Prince of the army of Jaho. According to the Septuagint, it's the Archestrategos, the arch general, the ruling general. You understand? This is of Jaho. One angel would be enough to devastate anything. This is the highest one. His name is with it. Who else would you send like this if you were Jaho? I'm not saying it has to be his firstborn son, but what I'm saying is we have a special one here, and he's called the Prince, at least in Joshua, and he has God's name within him, Exodus 23, and is given the authority not to part, basically given authority over life, right? Jah even says, you listen to him. Judges 13:20. So it came about that. Well, let's go up a little bit earlier. This is very important. Judges 13. You notice in verse 17, it says, Manoah said to Jehovah's angel, what is your name? That when your word comes true, we shall certainly do you honor. And in verse 18, the angel says, it says, Jehovah's angel said to him, this has to be the same angel. It's the same angel that's been going ahead of them doing all these things. But we'll leave it as an open issue now. I think it's the same. Here he answers and says, why should you ask about my name when it is a wonderful one? A wonderful one. A wonderful counselor. The spirit of counsel. The terms used here and in Isaiah are very similar. This is the adjective, peli, whereas in Isaiah, when it calls him, it really says he is a wonder who is giving counsel. And it uses the word pele. He's a wonder giving counsel. Why should you ask about my name when it is a wonderful one? Pele, Pele. Verse 19, and Manoah proceeded to take the kid of the goats and the grain offering to offer it upon the rock to Jaho. And as he was doing something in a wonderful way, while Manoah and his wife were looking on. Verse 20, so it came about that as the flame, they're offering a sacrifice to Jah right after this angel of Jaho, says his name is a wonderful one. Peli. Just like the one in Isaiah 9:6 would be a wonderful counselor. Pele. Verse 20 says, verse 19, they started to sacrifice to Jaho to show him praise and honor like they did in those days. And in verse 20, while they're doing this, as the flame ascends from the altar into the heavens, then Jehovah's angel ascended in the flame of the altar while Manoah and his wife were looking on. At once they fell upon their faces to the earth, just like Joshua. Verse 21, and Jehovah's angel did not repeat appearing to Manoah and his wife anymore. Then it was that Manoah knew that he had been Jehovah's angel. Do you think Manoah heard about Joshua's encounter with the prince of the army of Jaho? Do you think Manoah knew about Moses and what Jaho told him about the angel with his name, who would have all that authority and power not to pardon, who would go ahead of them and defeat all these nations? You think that was something they all knew about? Verse 22, consequently, Manoah said to his wife, we shall positively die. Because according to MWT, it is God we have seen. However, the text in the Hebrew, it says Elohim, but there's no reason it can't be translated a God here in terms of the majestic or even mammative sense that some believe may be the case with these suffixes, Semitic terms with M or dash M ending suffix, like Elohim. Some people consider that what they call memation. I'm not going to get into that right now, but either way, I find many times where plurals are used of singular subjects, and so it's not an issue. Even here in the Septuagint text, translated with the singular, theos. So they knew it was Jehovah's angel, right? They say it several times. And even with that knowledge, they fall upon their faces to the earth, prostrate, bowed low, just like Joshua. He knew who that was. The being who appeared to Joshua in Joshua 5 didn't say, I'm Jaho, even in a representative sense. He said, I'm the prince of the army of Jaho. Joshua didn't see a problem with that. Face to the earth, prostrate, bow low, my Lord, what do you want? No problem at all. I know who you are. You're that angel that was telling or foretold to Moses that would have Jaho's name and the authority not to pardon. And here you are with that sword, face to the earth. What do you want, my Lord? Why is that a problem? It's not a problem. So why would it be a problem in Isaiah 9, 6, and 7 if this angel here, who is sent forth by Jaho himself, and given all that authority, including Jaho's own name, the prince of the army of Jaho, if this angel here can ascend in the flame and then have those watching also fall to the earth like Joshua, and then identify Jehovah's angel as a god, as Elohim, theos, and yet not be compromising Jehovah's worship, right? They're doing it. They're in the process of worshiping him as they do these things. And then they were approved for everything they did. This is how the Bible talks. This is what the people in the Bible believed. This is what they meant when they called others whom they looked to as their future ruler, God, or a mighty God, or an angel of great counsel, or Jehovah's angel, or the prince of the army of Jaho. It is God we have seen. We know no one has seen God at any time. That's not a contradiction. It should be translated a God here. Just like Jesus saw no contradiction in John 10 by quoting Psalm 82, where it refers to the gods that God judges himself because they're not doing things right. He says, well, if they can be called gods, then why couldn't the one whom God sent forth be called God or a god? They'd both be true, just like they're true with this angel. You could look at it as both God in the representative sense that he's the angel of Jaho, right? What did Exodus 23 say? Listen to him because of what I will be speaking and he will be doing. That's exactly what Jesus says over and over and over again. And yet, why is there not a similarity seen between this angel, the one whom Jaho himself appoints with his own name and gives authority not to pardon, or to pardon, right? If you're pardoning or not pardoning, you're doing one or the other, or not the other. And so the one, that's almost identical to the authority that Jesus ultimately receives and even has to some extent while on earth. But the fact is, Jah was already doing it with this one, who is later, I believed, identified as Michael, the great prince of Israel, the one whom Enoch says was fighting with the sons of God along with the other angels before the flood, who, according to Jude, was fighting with the devil over Moses' body. Michael was there, according to Jude. Any Christian who claims to believe the New Testament letter of Jude agrees Michael was there with Moses' body. You mean to tell me Michael, the great prince of you people, and the prince of the army of Jaho are two different beings? I don't see how that's possible. Michael the archangel, or the archestrategos, they're the same thing, just different ways of referring to them. Just like you'll sometimes have angels referred to as angels and sometimes as gods, because they don't always speak the same during all these different periods of time. We don't even speak the same over different decades, let alone over different centuries. They develop dialectic differences, just different ways of speaking. My point is, none of this is unusual. It was happening all along. So now we look at Isaiah 9, 6, and 7. It starts to make more sense in terms of its ultimate fulfillment, at least as far as Jesus is concerned, right? That's what we're looking at. How does Isaiah 9, 6, and 7 have fulfillment potentially in Jesus? Well, I mean, listen to everything we've been talking about. It not only fits with him, it fits with the one before he was born as a man, namely Michael, the prince of the army of Jaho, the one whom the Dead Sea Scrolls also show, outside of even biblical text, was believed to be the one whom Jah would elevate above all the other angelic sons of God. Let's take a look at that, in fact. If you look at Daniel chapter 10, we'll go to that real briefly. Well, chapter 10, I'll go to it real quick if I can scan to it. Because in Daniel chapter 10, I'll just reference it because I want to get to some other stuff. In Daniel chapter 10, I want to get to your questions actually. Daniel chapter 10, if you go to verse 19, Michael, or the one who would have to be Michael because Gabriel's also there, and there's only two of those beings according to him. Michael is the prince of the very people that Gabriel's with and assisting, that is Daniel, the Israelites. And Michael's the only one that Gabriel said would come to him to help him against the kings of Greece and Persia. And then that same one who speaks says when he goes forth, the kings of Greece will come forth when he goes forth against the king of Persia, because they're protecting the people of Israel in order to bring forth the Messiah, which is him, right? He's the one who's been watching these people this whole time, just like Jesus said how often I wanted to gather you together, speaking of Israel, and then how Paul refers to him as the one who oversaw them since the time of the Exodus. Just like Jah said, according to Exodus 23:22. But in Daniel 19, Michael says he comes to Daniel, and Daniel's, having a hard time dealing with the presence of these beings, and he touches him just like an earthling man. He's identified as one like an earthling man, just like Joshua saw the prince of the army of Jaho. But here he gives Daniel strength, and he says, "May you have peace." Michael says that. He's offering peace. He's only fighting because he's defending the people of Jah and bringing forth the Messiah who would ultimately be this one whose rule would never end. But even here, while he's fighting with the princes of Greece and Persia, he makes peace with people. May you have peace, Daniel 10:19. Jesus says that exact same expression when he appears to his disciples, according to the New Testament accounts of Luke and John. In Luke 24:36, he says that. He comes to him, "May you have peace." In John 20:19, 21, and 26, he says it 3 times. In John 20:19, 21, and 26. The only other time it's used is by John himself in one of his letters, because obviously he had heard it said by Jesus so many times. So you have even a connection there. And it all associates to peace. And even in Revelation, when we read of the time of peace that would ultimately come from the Messiah's rule, that's described in terms and visions similar to what Daniel was given, it's preceded by a time where the one who would ultimately bring about that peaceful rule had to defeat the enemies of Jah. Just like the book of Psalms said, right? "Sit at my right hand while I place your enemies as a footstool for my feet." And then he would go forth subduing in the midst of his enemies and bring about the everlasting peace that we read about in Isaiah 11. That would be the result of the waters, the earth being filled with the knowledge of Jaho like the seas cover it, which we see expressed by everything living in Revelation 19. So we believe all of these things point to fulfillment in Jesus, as far as Isaiah 9, 6 and 7, and the things that are described, right? Notice that Jesus is called the everlasting or eternal Father, right? It's a child who's born and one who's promised and who will be called these things. And he may have already been called some of these things in the senses that he was the angel of Jaho, the prince of the army, Michael, who would not pardon you, right? That's what a father would do, just like a father. He has the authority, and he had the authority not to pardon them, to give life or to take life. It's the same with Jesus. In dying and in giving his life, he has been given the keys of death and Hades. so that he now can give life continuously. And because of that, we have a fulfillment in the sense of the eternal or everlasting Father, right? Because it's Jesus, according to Revelation, who gives from the fountain of water of life. It's Jesus, according to Revelation, that lets you eat from the secret garden of God, the tree of life that is in the secret garden of his God. So he is our Father in that sense. There's nothing unusual about it at all. But it's obviously associated with a child who becomes that. Right? We believe in the ultimate fulfillment, not just in a temporary sense like maybe some Jews did or might try to apply it previously. We see these texts as fulfillment through the line of David, through the line of Jesse, David's father, Isaiah 11, that can no longer be established. We don't have those records. The temple was destroyed. The records are gone. We cannot establish these lineages like they could back then. There's 2 of them in the Bible that shows Jesus' lineage all the way back in the way proper to relate it to this fulfillment of being in David's line, of Jesse's line. So we see Jesus as the fulfillment in the senses that, as Isaiah 11 says, he is given the spirit of counsel and the spirit of mightiness, the wonderful counselor, mighty God. He is a God, just like he said in comparison to the other gods against whom God's word came in John 10. That's why John opens his narrative message. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. The only begotten God in John 1:18. He calls him that instead of using theos iskeros, like some later translations of the Hebrew text, even though the primary Septuagint versions and the earliest ones use angel of great counsel, but like the corrector to Codex Sinaiticus, it says theos iskeros. Well, John calls him the only begotten, the monogenes theos. Oh man, see, that's why it's not a problem for us as Christian witnesses of Jah to accept Jesus as a God. He was foretold to be a mighty God. El Gibor, angel of great counsel. Michael the archangel, the prince of the army of Jaho, the one who went before the people of Israel because he had God's name in him and the authority to pardon or not pardon. It's the same with Jesus, who came in his Father's name and who is given the name above every name, not to his own glory, but to the glory of God the Father. All of these things fit within the biblical context and with Jewish literature contemporary with these biblical texts. Whether it's first Enoch and the description of Michael as far back as being before the flood, or Assumption of Moses is quoted by Jude that involves Michael with Moses' body, and therefore also associates him with the prince of the army of Jaho that went to Joshua right after that account. Right? It wasn't that long between Exodus, the death of Moses, and Joshua, chapter 5. And then you had the account in Judges where the same angel of Jaho ascends in the flame of the altar, almost prefiguring his sacrifice, right? It's like that angel knew what he had to do, that he would give his life as a sacrifice to Jah. And they accepted it. The ones on earth called him a god and bowed low to the earth, just like Joshua. Well, if they're all bowing to the angel of Jaho, if the angel of Jaho can be called a god, mighty God, and the prince, the great prince, prince of peace, may you have peace. If that is all a part of the biblical context and history, and it is, and it's supported by all the other biblical literature that exists, whether it's texts like First Enoch and other Dead Sea Scroll texts that speak of these beings in the same way, that is, as gods, not in a rival sense, but as those who serve God and therefore reinforce his great godship, there is nothing wrong with these beings being called these things. And there's nothing wrong with the one who would ultimately fulfill Jah's will being called mighty God, or only begotten God, or even great God, if you want to apply Titus 2:13, which I don't, as I've talked about before and shown. Don't think it applies grammatically, but it wouldn't be a problem. Why is that a problem for us? He's the mighty God anyway, or a mighty God. The angel of great counsel, we know what that means. Just like the angel of Jaho, who was called a god by Manoah and his wife. They weren't being polytheists, and neither was Jesus by quoting Psalm 82.